This video will cover socio-emotional or psychosocial development in middle and late childhood. So specifically, we'll talk about Erikson's fourth conflict. We'll talk about how our self-concept, self-esteem changes. We'll go over Kohlberg's theory of moral development. And then we'll also talk about the influence of peers and family on development during this time. So starting with Erikson, his psychological conflict for middle childhood is between industry and inferiority. This conflict is positively resolved when children develop a sense of competence at useful skills and tasks. In industrialized nations, the beginning of formal schooling marks the transition from early to middle childhood. In school, children develop their own or discover their own, as well as others' capabilities, and start to develop a sense of moral commitment and responsibility. The negative outcome of this stage is inferiority, or having a lack of confidence in the ability to do things and to do them well. So they'll see themselves as inferior and others as superior to them. The sense of industry, combining that positive yet realistic self-concept, feeling pride in one's accomplishments, having moral responsibility, and the ability to cooperatively engage with classmates. During the school years, children refine their self-concept, organizing their observations of behaviors and internal states into general dispositions. They emphasize their competencies. For example, I'm really good at math or whatever, right? They can clearly describe their personality, including both positive and negative traits, and are far less likely to describe themselves in extreme all or nothing ways. So the ability to understand, things are on a continuum, right? There's a lot of in between. School-age children frequently will make social comparisons or judgments of their appearance, abilities, and behavior in relation to others. Feedback from others has great influence on self-concept, perspective-taking skills, especially an improved ability to infer what others are thinking, are critical for developing a self-concept based on personality traits. As they internalize others' expectations, children form an ideal self, or who they think they should be, who they want to be, that they use to evaluate their real self, who they are, and this impacts their self-esteem. Children increasingly will look to more people beyond their family for information about themselves and will rely more on feedback from close friends. Their self-descriptions also include references to social groups they belong to, such as a sports team, a scout troop, 4-H, something like that. The content of their self-concept varies from culture to culture. Recent research has showed that in their self-descriptions, United States children list more personal attributes, whereas Chinese children list more attributes involving group membership and relationships, which really falls in line when you know that the US is an individualistic culture and China is more of a collectivistic culture. The hierarchical structure of self-esteem in middle elementary school. Okay, so by 6 to 7 years of age, children in diverse Western cultures have formed at least 4 broad areas of self-esteem: academic competence, or how well they do in school; social competence, how well they're able to get along with others; physical or athletic competence, are they good at running, jumping, sports; and physical appearance, how they look. As children attach greater importance to certain self-evaluations, self-esteem takes on this hierarchical structure, with physical appearance being often rated the most important, unfortunately. From middle childhood on, individual differences in self-esteem do become more stable, and positive relationships between self-esteem, valuing of various activities, and success at those activities will emerge and strengthen. Having a low profile of self-esteem in all areas is linked to anxiety, depression, and other increased increased antisocial behaviors. Self-efficacy refers to the belief that you're capable of carrying out a particular task or of reaching a certain goal. Self-efficacy influences your motivation to persevere even when a task is difficult, right? We're more likely to keep trying if we feel confident we're able to do it. Self-efficacy can also lead to self-fulfilling prophecies, right? If we think we can do it, we're going to work harder to do it and are in turn more likely to do it, versus if we don't have self-efficacy, we don't think we're capable of completing something, don't try as hard, and in fact, we end up being less able to complete it. So our self-efficacy is subjective. It might be accurate, it might be inaccurate. Albert Bandura suggests that the optimal level of self-efficacy is at or slightly above one's true ability. Moving on to moral reasoning. Piaget's work on the moral judgment of children inspired Lawrence Kohlberg's more comprehensive cognitive developmental theory of moral understanding. Using the clinical interviewing procedure, Kohlberg presented a sample of 10 to 16-year-old boys with hypothetical moral dilemmas, stories involving a conflict between two moral values. For each dilemma, Kohlberg asked participants what the main actor should do and why, and he then followed them longitudinally, re-interviewing them at 3 to 4 year intervals over the next 20 years in order to develop his theory. Kohlberg's well-known Heinz dilemma pits the value of obeying the law against the value of human life. So he had several dilemmas. This is just one of them. So it's known as the Heinz dilemma, and it basically says that a woman's wife, or a man's wife is dying of cancer, and there's only one drug that can save her. The only place to get this drug is at the store of a pharmacist who's known to overcharge people for drugs. The man, Heinz, tries the hardest he can only get together $1,000 or half of what it costs. The pharmacist wants $2,000. The pharmacist refuses to sell it to him for less or to let him pay later. Heinz gets desperate. He breaks into the pharmacy and steals the medicine. Should he have done that? Was it right or wrong? And why? So Kohlberg very much emphasized that moral maturity depends on the way an individual reasons about the dilemma and not on the content of the response, whether or not to steal. Kohlberg organized moral development into 3 levels, each with 2 stages. He believed that moral understanding is promoted by actively grappling with moral issues and by noticing weaknesses in one's current reasoning and having gains in one's perspective and in perspective taking. Ugh, said that weird, sorry. So let's talk about stages or levels and stages. So at the pre-conventional level, this is where morality is very externally controlled. Children will accept the rules of authority figures and judge actions by their consequences. The 2 stages of the pre-conventional level are the punishment and obedience orientation and the instrumental purpose orientation. So the punishment and obedience orientation, stage 1, children at this level, or at this stage, sorry, find it difficult to acknowledge 2 points of view in a moral dilemma. And they again are looking really for avoiding punishment. They're not looking at people's intentions. They're focused on fearing authority and avoiding punishment as reasons for behaving morally. So a child in stage 1 might say Heinz is right for stealing the drug because if you let your wife die, you'll be blamed for not spending the money to help her, and there'll be an investigation of you and the pharmacist for your wife's death. They might also say he was wrong for stealing. They might say you shouldn't steal the drug because you'll be caught and sent to jail if you do, and if you do get away, you'll be worried that the police will catch up to you at any minute. So either way, right, the focus is on avoiding punishment. The instrumental purpose orientation, children become aware that people can have different perspectives in a moral dilemma, but at first this understanding is pretty limited to the concrete. So they see right actions as really being those that promote self-interest, and they understand reciprocity as an equal exchange of favors. You do this for me, I'll do that for you, quid pro quo. Right? So a child at this stage might say Heinz is right for stealing. If he decides to risk jail to save his wife, that's his life he's risking. He can do what he wants. Same goes for the pharmacist. It's up to him to decide what he wants to do. They might also say Heinz is wrong for stealing. He's running more risk than it's worth to save a wife who is near death. So again, either way, regardless of whether to say right or wrong, the focus is on the rewards. What can I get out of this? The conventional level. At this level, individuals regard conformity to social rules as important because they believe that actively maintaining the current social system ensures positive relationships and societal order. The two stages here are the good boy, good girl orientation, or the morality of interpersonal cooperation, and then stage 4, the social order maintaining orientation. So with the good boy, good girl orientation, the desire is to obey rules to promote social harmony. And this first appears in terms of close relationships. So you want to have the affection and approval of your friends, of your relatives by being a good person, right? Somebody who is trustworthy, loyal, respectful, helpful, nice, right? Seeing people as good. You want people to see you as good. And this, they also gain the capacity to view two-person relationships from the vantage point of an impartial outside observer. Here, individuals understand ideal reciprocity. So they can express the same concern for someone else as they do for themselves. Sometimes this is referred to as the golden rule, the idea that you treat others the way you want to be treated, right? So children or people at this stage, might be children, might be older, might say Heinz is right for stealing. No one will think you're bad if you steal the drug, but your family will think you're an inhuman husband if you don't. If you let your wife die, you'll never be able to look anyone in the face again. They might also say he's wrong to steal because it isn't just the pharmacist who will think you're a criminal, everyone else will too. You'll feel bad thinking about how you've brought dishonor on your family and yourself. So again, that idea about wanting to be accepted by others being the underlying reasoning for people at stage 3. Stage 4, social order maintaining orientation. Here, individuals thinking a bit more of a larger perspective rather than just like friends and family, being concerned about society and its laws. So here the idea is rules need to be enforced across the board for everyone, and everyone in a society has a responsibility to uphold those laws. So the idea here is that the individual believes laws shouldn't be disobeyed because they're vital for ensuring societal order and cooperation between others. So an individual at this stage might say Heinz is right to steal the drug. He has a duty to protect his wife's life. It's a vow he took in marriage. They might say, but it's wrong to steal. So he'd have to take the drug with the idea of paying the pharmacist for it and accepting the penalty for breaking the law later. Somebody at this stage might also reason that Heinz is wrong to steal the drug because even if his wife is dying, it's still Heinz's duty as a citizen to obey the law. If everyone starts breaking the law in a jam, there'd be no civilization, just crime and violence. And I should note that I'm reading actual quotes from, or paraphrases, not direct quotes exactly, of individuals who responded to the Heinz dilemma. So here again, you see that common concern with breaking the law. The post-conventional or principled level, this is where individuals have moved beyond unquestioning support for their own society's rules and laws. They define morality in terms of abstract principles and values that apply to all situations in societies. Self-chosen principles of fairness and justice may sometimes conflict with the law. So we have two stages. Stage 5, the social contract orientation. This is where individuals view the laws and rules as flexible instruments to further human purposes, and they'll freely follow them when they're consistent with individual rights and the interests of the majority. People at this stage, we don't get an anti-stealing response. People don't say, no, he was wrong, in terms of how they might reason about Hines stealing. They might say he was right because although there is a law against stealing, the law wasn't meant to violate a person's right to life. If Hines is prosecuted for stealing, the law needs to be reinterpreted to take into account situations in which it goes against people's natural right to keep on living. Stage 6, the universal ethical principle orientation. This is where right action is defined by self-chosen ethical principles of conscience that are valid for all people, regardless of law and social agreement. So somebody at this stage might say he was right to steal it because it doesn't make sense to put respect for property above respect for life itself. People could live together without private property at all. Respect for human life and personality is absolute, and accordingly, people have a mutual duty to save one another from dying. And again, at this stage, there's no anti-stealing responses. So what does more current research say? Kohlberg's original research and other longitudinal studies provide the most convincing evidence for his stage sequence. With few exceptions, individuals do move through those first 4 stages in the predicted order at a slow and gradual pace. Reasoning at stages 1 and 2 typically decreases in early adolescence, and by mid-adolescence, we're having an increase in reasoning at stage 3. Stage 4 reasoning rises over the teen years until among college-educated young adults, it is the typical response. Kohlberg believed few people move beyond stage 4 to the post-conventional stages. A key challenge to Kohlberg's theory, however, is the absence of clear evidence that stage 6 actually follows stage 5. Like Piaget's cognitive stages, Kohlberg's theory does not develop in a neat, stepwise fashion. Instead, people often draw on a range of moral responses that vary with context. Additionally, in real life, people often reason below their actual capacity. So for example, a lot of people, most people, we've done things where we knew it was wrong, but we did it anyway, right? We're capable of reasoning at higher levels, but depending on the situation, we might reason at a lower level. A great example of this is speeding, right? So you think it's right to speed, yes or no, why? A lot of people will give a reason like, well, it's, I don't speed because I don't want a ticket, or I don't speed, or I do speed because I need to get where I'm going. I'm a good driver, it's fine, right? I'm in a hurry. And these are both examples of pre-conventional level reasoning, focusing on avoiding punishment or focusing on self-interest and rewards. And I would wager most of us are capable of at least reasoning at the conventional level, even though we might reason at that pre-conventional level. Additionally, moral reasoning does not correlate well with moral behavior. It's only moderately correlated. Again, just because you know something's wrong doesn't necessarily mean you don't do it. So it doesn't always follow. Additional concerns with Kohlberg's research, it was based on industrialized Western cultures and males. So for collectivistic cultures which emphasize social harmony and the importance of cooperation, typically they will see conventional level moral reasoning as the highest level, as opposed to post-conventional. Doesn't mean they're less moral, it just is a different value. Different doesn't mean wrong, just means different. Because Kohlberg only studied males, Carol Gilligan and other researchers have argued that his theory does not adequately represent the morality of girls and women. Gilligan believes that feminine morality emphasizes an ethic of care, a concern for others, that Kohlberg's system devalues a different but no less valid basis for moral judgment than a focus on impersonal right. Many studies have tested Gilligan's claim that Kohlberg's approach underestimates the moral maturity of females. However, most studies did not support that. On both hypothetical dilemmas as well as everyday moral problems, adolescent and adult females display reasoning at the same stage as their male age mates, and often at a higher stage. So these findings suggest that although Kohlberg emphasizes justice rather than caring as the highest moral ideal, his theory seems to tap into both sets of values. Nevertheless, some evidence does indicate that although the morality of males and females taps into both orientations, females tend to emphasize care in their reasoning, whereas males either stress justice or focus equally on justice and care. So always important to remember, does our sample accurately represent our population, especially if we're going to draw conclusions and say that they apply to our population. So if we want our theory to apply to different sexes, different cultures, very important to have a sample that reflects those other groups. Selman and his stages of friendship. Basically, this is the idea that we move from more immature, less personal and intimate friendships to gradually more and more intimate friendships. So the first stage, momentary physical interaction, right, very brief, not much there. One-way assistance, one person helping another with something. Fair weather cooperation, cooperating, working on a similar goal if it's not too much of a bother, right? If it's not inconvenient to you. Intimate mutual sharing. So as we get older, get into middle school, high school, getting into adolescence, right? We put more emphasis on having close relationships where we share personal details about ourselves. This is sometimes referred to as a self-disclosure. So sharing our hopes, our fears, our goals, personal information like that. And then autonomous interdependence. This is kind of where we stop being so selfish with our friendships. We realize we can have multiple friends, they can have multiple friends. It's not just my best friend and no one else's, right? Because we value having somebody to lean on, but we also tend to value being able to do our own thing as well. The society of peers becomes increasingly important as a context for development in middle childhood. Peer contact contributes to perspective taking and to understanding oneself and others. By the end of middle childhood, children will form peer groups or collectives that generate unique values and standards for behavior and a social structure of leaders and followers. Within a peer group, children acquire many social skills like cooperation, leadership. When children are no longer respected and get excluded from groups, they may turn to other low status peers with poor social skills, thereby reducing their opportunities to acquire more socially competent behaviors. Desire for group membership can also be fulfilled through more formal groups, such as scouting, organized sports, things like that. Peer acceptance refers to likability, or the extent to which a child is viewed by a group of age mates as a worthy social partner. It's measured by asking children to vote for people they like and vote for people they don't like, privately, not like raise your hand kind of thing. So children's self-reports reveal 4 general categories. Popular children, who are well-liked, meaning that they get a lot of positive votes from their peers. Rejected children, who are disliked, they get many negative votes from their peers. Controversial children, who receive many votes, both positive and negative. And neglected children, who are seldom mentioned either positively or negatively. About 2/3 of pupils in a typical elementary school classroom fits into one of these categories, and 1/3 are average in peer acceptance. Peer acceptance is a powerful predictor of psychological adjustment. Rejected children are anxious, unhappy, disruptive, have low self-esteem. Peer rejection in middle childhood is also strongly associated with many problems, including poor school performance, antisocial behavior, delinquency in adolescence, and sometimes even criminality in young adulthood. Social behavior plays a powerful role in determining why one child is liked while another is rejected. And we see subgroups form based on these social behaviors. So we have, for the popular group, both popular prosocial and popular antisocial. And it's important to point out here, antisocial meaning against society, so against laws and rules, no problem violating other people's rights. It does not mean not social, that would be asocial, right? So one of those psychology terms that's used in general conversations with a very different meaning. So just wanted to clarify. Popular prosocial children. These are children that have academic competence and social competence. The popular antisocial children, on the other hand, these are kids that might be tough boys who are athletically skilled but poor students, and they cause trouble and defy adult authority to get attention. This includes relationally aggressive boys and girls who exclude, ignore, and spread rumors about other children in order to enhance their own status, like mean girls. With age, peers like these high status aggressive youths less and less. The rejected category also has subcategories. So rejected aggressive children, the largest subtype of rejected children. They show high rates of conflict, both physical and relational aggression, and hyperactive and impulsive behaviors. There's also the rejected withdrawn children, who are passive, socially awkward, and often overwhelmed by social anxiety. So rejected children generally have a few or no friends, and that results in greater likelihood of severe adjustment difficulties. Both types of rejected children are at risk for peer harassment, but the rejected aggressive children may also act as bullies, and the rejected withdrawn children are especially likely to be targets of peer victimization, verbal and physical attacks, or other forms of abuse. The controversial children, they display both positive and negative social behaviors, and that's why they have such a mixed peer opinion. They're kind of, you either love them or you hate them type of person. Though they have friends, they often bully others and engage in calculated relational aggression. And finally, the neglected children. These children were once thought to be in need of treatment, but further research determined that they typically are just as socially skilled as average children. They just don't stand out a lot. What about long-term? So for adults who were accepted by their peers as children, generally they have better romantic and work relationships, earn more money, and have better health. Those who are unaccepted as children are at greater risk of anxiety, depression, substance use, suicide, obesity, and other physical health problems. This is, by no means a guarantee, just one factor that might put you at higher risk for certain things, certain outcomes. Bullying. Bullying refers to unwanted aggressive behavior that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. Bullying can be verbal, like name calling, teasing. It can be relational, like excluding others or spreading rumors, or it can be physical, like actual hitting or kicking. Cyberbullying has become common with the rise of the internet and cell phones, and it can be especially hard for children to avoid cyberbullying because it can occur even while they're at home. Cyberbullies can stay anonymous and distribute hurtful materials very quickly and widely. Children who are perceived as different are at greater risk of being bullied. So children who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, children who are disabled, overweight, physically weak, less popular, these are all groups that are more likely to be bullied. Often people who are bullied do not ask for help. They see it as being more likely to increase their problem, worsening the situation. Bullies often have high self-esteem, are popular, have many friends, but they lack empathy for others. They're often popular antisocial or controversial children, but can also sometimes be rejected aggressive children who have low self-esteem and who act out due to their feelings of insecurity. Luckily, there are increasing programs in school to help counteract bullying. So switching gears from focusing on peers to family. To assess the quality of family life, we can look at the functions of a family, which include providing food, clothing, and shelter, encouraging learning, developing self-esteem, nurturing friendships with peers, and providing harmony and stability. In middle childhood, the amount of time children spend with their parents declines dramatically. Although school-age children often press for greater independence, they know how much they still need their parents' or guardians' support. Children of parents who engage in joint decision-making are more likely to listen to their parents' or guardians' perspectives in situations where compliance is vital. So if, the children have some say, some input on rules, that really helps gain their compliance and increases their trust in you. So if, it's something really serious, they're more likely to listen. Many different family types can meet these tasks successfully. And we've seen a big variety in terms of living arrangements over the last several decades. Back in 1960, 92% of children lived with married parents, 5% had parents who were divorced or separated, and 1% lived with never married parents. Compare that to 2017, where 65% of children lived with married parents, 32% with an unmarried parent, and 3% living without any parents. Of the 25% living with a single parent or guardian, most, 21%, lived with a solo mother. A concern with living with one parent is a higher risk of living in poverty. So 30% of solo mothers, 17% of solo fathers, and 16% of cohabiting couples live in poverty compared to only 8% of married couples. Children who are raised by lesbian and gay parents are no different than children raised by heterosexual parents. We've had more than 25 years of research which has found no significant differences in psychological adjustment, gender identity, gender role development, sexual orientation, intelligence, behavior problems, social relations, or substance use. Despite having decreased over the past 12 decades, the US divorce rate is still one of the highest in the industrialized world, far exceeding the rates in other countries. So it has declined, but still 45% of American marriages end in divorce, and half of these involve children. A quarter of US children live in single parent households, as I said, most with their mothers. About 2/3 of divorced parents will remarry, And half of those remarriages, will eventually end in divorce as well. Although studies have reported that marital breakup is stressful for children, great individual differences exist in how well children adjust. One of the overriding factors in a positive adjustment following divorce is effective parenting. Are you shielding the child from family conflict? Are you using authoritative child rearing? Is there contact is there contact with the non-custodial parent? That's a big concern. Particularly in the US, paternal contact has risen over the last 3 decades. The more paternal contact and the warmer the father-child relationship, the less children tend to react with defiance and aggression. And then regardless of the extent of friction between divorcing parents, those who engage in co-parenting or supporting one another in their child rearing roles greatly improves children's chances of growing up happy and stable. So again, how much conflict is there? How much financial hardship? It is higher risk of falling into poverty, falling into divorce. How does the couple act? Are they, being cordial? Are they supporting one another in their parenting roles, or are they, trying to make the child choose sides, putting them in the middle of it? And then particularly the adjustment of the custodial parent. So if one parent has custody, how well are they adjusting to the divorce? So short-term consequences, generally family contact rises around the time of divorce. So divorce can provide a relief from that conflict. Children need time to grieve over the loss of their previous family situation. Many mother-headed households experience a sharp drop in income, so 25 to 50%. 5 years later, make 94% of pre-divorce family income. So very hard to get back to that higher level of financial stability, which can limit opportunities and increase stress. The transition from marriage to divorce typically leads to high levels of stress, depression, anxiety, and to a disorganized family situation in which discipline may become harsh and inconsistent. If a parent, like a father, sees their child only occasionally, they may be more permissive in their parenting, and that can make the custodial parent, often the mother's task of managing the child, more difficult, because she kind of gets put into that role as the disciplinarian, right? The mean one. Younger children often blame themselves for a marital breakup and fear abandonment by both parents. Older children, on the other hand, can understand that they're not responsible for their parents' divorce, but they still may react strongly and become unruly. The oldest child in a family may display more mature behaviors, providing both practical and emotional support. When temperamentally difficult children are exposed to stressful life events and inadequate parenting, their problems become magnified. Easy children, on the other hand, tend to cope more effectively with adversity. Generally speaking, girls may respond to divorce with crying and withdrawal, but children of both sexes may show demanding and attention-getting behavior. In mother custody families, boys are at slightly greater risk for serious adjustment problems. So most children show improved adjustment 1 to 2 years following a divorce, but overall they continue to score slightly lower than children of continuously married parents in academic achievement, self-esteem, and emotional and behavioral problems. One study found 25% of adults whose parents divorced experienced social, emotional, or psychological problems, compared with 10% of adults whose parents remain married. So it's a higher risk, but it's definitely not a guarantee. Adults whose parents divorce commonly report greater anxiety about marriage And those who do marry often tend to report higher levels of dissatisfaction with marriage, have unrealistic expectations for their spouse, and are more likely to get divorced themselves. Adults whose parents divorced may have lower levels of education or occupational status, but this could be due to the lower income level that commonly goes along with divorce rather than due to the divorce itself. What about the positives? Negative outcomes of divorce are not inevitable, especially when there are so many variables that influence our development. So it's important to remember that most children whose parents divorce are happy and well-adjusted as adults. Often these individuals report having a better relationship with their custodial parent, more communication with their mothers, and receive more democratic parenting. The divorce may also allow children to escape from negative role models and a chance to become more independent, particularly seeing greater emotional independence among sons. How that custodial parent adjusts to the divorce, again, a huge factor in how children adjust to it as well. Repartnering. So cohabitation can be difficult, as about 50% of cohabiting relationships in the United States last less than 2 years. Even with long-term cohabitation, if the relationship ends, children usually do not remain in contact. So if the family also remarries or the parent remarries, that can be more difficult following the divorce. There's changes in how the rules work and how what the schedules are, how to deal with discipline matters, and it also impacts parental involvement. So the greatest level of involvement for a non-custodial parent is when neither partner has remarried. So that's where we see the greatest involvement with children. The least amount of involvement is when the father has remarried and the mother has not. And again, mother typically having custody of the children. So step families, blended families, reconstituted families. We have a couple different terms here. So this is a family structure resulting from remarriage of a divorced parent that includes parent, child, and new step relatives. It has been common for hundreds of years, but now divorce is the reason for remarriage rather than death. So really, remarriage is not an uncommon thing. Just different reasons nowadays, thank goodness. Excuse me. 1 in 6 children live in blended families, and it can be challenging. As I kind of mentioned a little bit before, they are more complex because there's the combining of 2 different sets of rules and routines. They are born of loss, and it's important to remember that children very much need time to grieve the loss of their previous family dynamic. Love is not really assumed in a blended family, and so more demonstrations of acceptance and affection may be needed to help develop a good relationship between step parent and stepchild. And then unclear roles. It can be hard for both step parents and stepchildren to kind of navigate authority, rules, expectations, discipline, right, murky, potentially high potential for arguments and dissatisfaction there. And finally, getting to the last part of the chapter, which is COVID-19's impact on middle and late childhood. 20% more children lost a parent than is typical in 2021. And just as of February of that year, the count was 37,300 children who had a parent die due to COVID, and thousands more died due to the pandemic. So, when the hospitals were full, people couldn't get in, couldn't get surgeries that they needed, treatment they needed. These deaths impacted Black children the most due to factors like less access to healthcare and the large number of Black parents working essential jobs that could not be done from home. So greater likelihood of being exposed and contracting COVID as well. Children who experience parental death are at greater risk of traumatic grief, difficulties in school, mental health problems, suicide, unintentional deaths. And these losses were very much compounded by social isolation. Humans are social creatures, and even if you're more introverted or shy, typically you still like having some interactions with a few people sometimes. Very few people could be completely happy living isolated, completely without contact. So yeah, isolation very much hurtful to us. At one point, about 90% of students were not in classrooms. Lower income students were most impacted due to lack of access to the internet and computers. Additionally, access to food was problematic because many low income students rely on schools to provide breakfast and or lunch. All students face difficulties with remote learning, as many teachers had not received training in online instruction and were just told, get online, teach them, without the support and resources and training needed to do that in a successful way. Other support services, such as counseling and special education, were also very limited during the lockdown. Gun violence increased since COVID began. During the first 6 months of 2022, 320 mass shootings occurred, such as the Highland Park Parade incident, the Uvalde school shooting, and the racist shooting at a Buffalo, New York grocery store. We are on track to meet or exceed the record of 692, which was set just the year before in 2021. Tracking started in 2014. There were 120 school shootings by the end of May of 2022, with the Robb Elementary shooting being the deadliest since the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012. We lost 19 children and 2 teachers in the Uvalde shooting. While exposure to violence is part of some adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, exposure to gun violence is not specified. And some researchers really want it to be, so that more funding would be available for both prevention and intervention strategies. President Biden signed a gun bill in June of 2022 to increase background checks for people between the ages of 18 and 20. That prevents convicted domestic abusers from purchasing guns, and that encourages states to pass red flag laws. Red flag laws basically allow judges to have a person's guns taken away if they're considered a risk to themselves or others. A poll showed that 68% of American voters supported stricter gun laws. So we'll see how, if that has an impact, if there's a lot of shooting. So that kind of wraps up our chapter on middle and late childhood and the many aspects of development. Thank you.